On the south coast of Dorset, just a little on from the famous lighthouse at Portland Bill, lies the seaside town of Weymouth. Most who visit the town over the summer simply want to lie on its beaches or drink in its pubs, and when they look around them they see nothing more than the quaint Georgian facade it presents to the world. However, like most towns in the West Country, it has a much deeper and darker history, one that many would prefer to forget. For example, not far from my sister's flat near Weymouth Harbour lies a street named Helen Lane. Nowadays it's an unassuming little road that runs behind the harbourside pubs that lie along Custom House Quay. However, there was a time when this seemingly innocuous street went by the name Hell Lane. You see, although the town exists as a united borough today, this was far from the case for most of its early history. For at least the first 500 years of its existence, the town that bore the name Weymouth only occupied the western edge of the Wey River estuary. The town that lay along its eastern edge was instead known as Melcombe. Given that the natural harbour formed by the estuary was central to each town's economic survival, they soon became bitter rivals, often resorting to violence and sabotage between restless periods of rumbling mistrust. So, when in the summer of 1348, a ship carrying a cargo of fine wine and soldiers returning from France began to enter the harbour, the fine folk of each town mobilised. Boats were sent out from either side delivering fine greetings and a summary of assets, beseeching the ship's captain to choose a side on which to dock. As this huckstering continued, the quayside whores and pub landlords filed out and lined up to advertise their wares. Eventually, though, after much cajoling, the ship captain made his choice and turned his rudder towards Melcombe. Once docked, it didn't take long to offload the barrels of French wine into a warehouse close by, and even less time for the soldiers and sailors to offload into the nearest pub. From the looks of the cargo and the soldiers flush with coin, it seemed as if the town would glean a tidy profit from its new arrivals. However, unbeknownst to all, there was another passenger on the ship that day, one which would later cause the most profound pain and senseless suffering to all that it touched. No one knows exactly who first fell prey to the pestilence. Maybe it was one of the soldiers who'd been drinking away their memories of the battlefield, or a harbourside wench who'd gotten too close to a patron. Either way, what we do know is that its savage hunger soon began to ravage the town. In just a few short days, the bloody coughing began, soon to be replaced with the black growths and the deadly fever. Before the townsfolk could catch their breath, the streets of Melcombe were seized by an insatiable malady that consumed all those who crossed its path. High or low, young or old, pious or ungodly, it seized all and then delivered them, pain-racked, desperate and bleeding, into the realm of their Creator. The people of Weymouth looked on and saw the plague as God's vengeance on the wickedness of their rivals, while those in Melcombe looked back convinced it was the others' doing. Not for the first time, antipathy turned to violence. Boats were burned and buildings attacked as the desperate denizens of the parish did to each other what they could not do to the disease. Standing in the middle of this maelstrom, the mayor of Melcombe, along with its aldermen, decided that action must be taken to contain the curse. So, with sticks and ropes and cudgels and chains, the bailiffs and the burgesses and those soldiers that could be deputised went out into the town. There they knocked down doors, dragged the ailing out of bed and seized anyone with the slightest sign of the malady. Once collected, these poor souls were rounded up and locked inside the same warehouse that held the plague ship's cargo. Once the chains were tightened, the locks fastened and the building secured, a giant white X was painted across the door. Then, in his loudest and most officiant voice, the mayor read a proclamation. From this day forward, it was decreed, no soul in the town is to approach this building, not to supply food or supply water, not to converse with a loved one or even offer the last rites. Should any man, woman or child defy this order, their nose shall be split, their ears docked, and they shall be forced to join the damned souls within. The townsfolk retreated then, doing their best to drown out or ignore the desperate pleas for relief that echoed through the streets. After a few days, those who passed by it even managed to force the sound of hopeless, desperate pleading to the back of their conscious minds. That was, of course, until the screaming began. The fearsome, blood-curdling screaming that erupted on the third day and did not settle until the fifth. No one could ignore that, and those who heard it remained haunted till their final days. You see, while some of the inmates had managed to snatch a few dry crusts of bread before they were taken, or maybe a skin of ale, these meagre supplies soon ran out. While many inside chose to lay down and be taken by starvation and thirst rather than the bloody affliction, there were other men there. Men with sharp knives. Sharp knives, empty bellies, and a familiarity with what would later become known as the custom of the sea. It took a full 2 weeks for the screaming and the crying and the begging to stop, and another 2 for those in power to work up the courage to open the doors. There are no chronicles or parish records detailing what was found within, and for that we can be truly thankful, for it was on that day that the street the warehouse sat on became known to all as Hell Lane. Maybe if their imprisonment had succeeded in containing the pestilence, then the suffering of those inside may not have been entirely in vain. But this was not to be. Instead, the malady that came to Melcombe that year quickly broke the bonds of that parish and spread throughout the land. We know it today as the Black Death, and those of you that know your history will recall that by the time it was done, almost half of Britain's population had been claimed. So, rather than the plague's finale, the barbarity of Melcombe was simply its prelude, and one that still resonates today. Even now, those who walk down the lane late at night often feel a chill and an inexplicable terror creep over them. There are, after all, some types of suffering that leave a permanent imprint that neither time nor remembrance can wash away, and this is surely one of them.